A mock trial perfectly aligns with the principles of an argumentative essay. It serves as a dynamic performance, a base method for teaching the same core skills. They both require students to build and present a compelling argument using evidence, addressing opposing claims, structuring their case logically. So, this mock trial is an excellent example for an argumentative essay. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Sweeting DeCaro, and this is IDS City College, CWE in the building, and this is a mock trial.
Call this court to order. My name is Lisara de Rosa, and I will be the judge for today's proceedings. All parties are expected to behave respectfully and follow courtroom rules. We will begin with the opening statements. Prosecution, please rise. You may proceed.
Members of the jury, the prosecution argues that Dr. King's approach to civil disobedience, while presented as peaceful, creates real risk for the community. When a leader encourages people to break laws, even for a reason they believe is right, it weakens the structure that keeps society stable and invites chaos and disorder. Once people begin choosing which laws they want to follow, society moves closer to confusion and disorder and farther from justice. We ask you to find Dr. King's approach guilty of undermining social stability.
You may be seated. Defense, you may rise. Members of the jury, we stand today not to defend chaos, but to defend conscience. When the law itself is unjust, obedience does not defend human morals, resistance does. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is here today not because he defended disorder, but because he challenged a disorder far worse, a legal system built on oppression and inequality. He taught that when laws are crafted to degrade rather than uplift, it becomes both a moral right and a responsibility to resist, not with violence, but with civil disobedience. We ask you to find Dr. King not guilty because justice requires us to confront the harm that unjust systems inflict on our community. You may be seated. Counsel for prosecution, if you will now do your main argument, you may rise.
King admits in his own letter that his actions caused tension in Birmingham. He writes that he stands between a group that has become used to segregation and another group that is growing more angry and willing to support violence. By placing himself between these extremes, he acknowledges the danger of encouraging people to break laws in a community that is already divided and frustrated. This supports our point that civil disobedience increases instability.
We also know that these protests disrupted daily life. For business owners, customers could not reach stores, deliveries were delayed, and employees felt unsafe traveling to work. Streets were blocked and traffic was interrupted. Even if the goal was justice, the immediate effect was uncertainty, economic loss, and fear within the community. A city cannot function when its daily routine is interrupted by the defiance of the law. Families, senior citizens, and many others rely on these streets and businesses every day.
It is also important to remember that change has legal paths. Courts, elections, petitions, and negotiations exist for a reason. When King encourages people to break laws instead of using the system that was created to solve problems, it sets a dangerous precedent where people believe they can ignore lawful authority whenever they disagree. The Heritage Foundation explains this risk clearly. Civil disobedience, quote, must be confined to rare and exceptional circumstances, end quote, because repeated use, quote, heightens the likelihood of a corrosive effect on the public's attachment to law, end quote. This shows that even scholars who defend civil disobedience admit that using it too often weakens the respect society has for the law.
For these reasons, and supported both by King's own words and by outside evidence, the prosecution argues that civil disobedience encourages chaos, harms communities, and disrupts lawful order, and this also sets a dangerous precedent for future conflicts. A stable society cannot function when laws are treated as optional.
You may be seated. Defense, you may rise.
In his letter from Birmingham jail, Dr. King clearly distinguishes between just and unjust laws. One has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws, King 1963. King is not activating for lawlessness. He is appealing to a higher moral law rooted in human dignity, civil disobedience. As King practiced it, it is not about breaking law thoughtlessly. It is about exposing their injustice so that they can be reformed. His approach requires participants to break law openly, lovingly, and with a willingness to accept the consequences, showing great respect for justice than any silent submission to immortality.
He talked about a world built upon character, not on skin color. In his I Have a Dream, his philosophy of civil disobedience lay in love, humanity, and compassion rather than hatred. He believed in love and moral courage to achieve equality, rejecting anything that even appeared to be forced.
In resisting unjust laws, King was not trying to weaken society. He was striving to heal it. Civil disobedience is not a threat when it defends dignity, exposes oppression, and calls for a kind of justice that strengthens communities rather than divides them. To condemn Dr. King would condemn the very tools that have made our country more just and humane.
The Montgomery bus boycott, the March on Washington, the Selma marches all pressured the nation to govern its standards, hence directly leading to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Acts of 1965. Dr. King's philosophy resonates throughout ages. Protest is not the enemy of progress, it's the engine. You may be seated. We will now hear from our witnesses. Witness one, will you please come forward and be sworn in? Will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give in this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
What is your name and what do you have to add to this case?
My name is Sophia Shankimenes, and I was a restaurant or business owner. And I was there, or I witnessed the chaos firsthand during the Birmingham marches.
Prosecution, you may rise and question my witness.
First question for you. Was your business located near the area where the protests took place?
Yes.
What did you personally see happening on screen? Did the protests make it harder for customers to reach your store?
Oh, 100%. The streets were blocked, traffic was disrupted, and my business suffered, significant losses. I mean, if we talk about a bunch of the boycotts, the 1963 boycott of Birmingham businesses and other local boycotts inflicted major costs on business owners like myself.
Were there any deliveries or workers delayed because the streets were crowded or blocked?
Oh yeah, customers couldn't reach stores, deliveries were delayed, and employees were unsure whether to come to work. Even if the protests were meant to support integration, they caused widespread disruption.
Did your business lose money or experience a drop in sales during the protests?
100%.
From your perspective, did the protests create any sort of tension or disorder in the community?
Oh, 100%. I strongly believe that change should happen through legal channels. And while these boycotts and protests were historically effective in pressuring those empowered to support integration, the method involved, breaking laws and disrupting businesses. I think that was wrong.
You may be seated. Defense, you may rise. The question is finished. First off, uh. Let's start here. Would you say your business serves the whole,
I would say so.
everybody in the community?
Most.
Most, okay. So with that being said, do we feel like your business is somewhere where, sorry, would you prefer that, would you say that justice is represented in your business? Equality is served as the society is supposed to see it?
What do you mean by that, sorry?
Like the way that you want people in society treated the same way everybody is being served in your business.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. So would we say that, would you prefer that injustice was kept hidden to keep, so that life can remain peaceful?
I would prefer it not in the front of my business.
Not in front of your business,
Yeah.
so you would prefer if it was quiet so that your business can continue moving?
I didn't say quiet, it could be somewhere else, just not in front of my business.
Okay, understood. So if,
Though like you have a lot of wide variety of clients, I would say that's true, right? You have a lot of variety, like colors, races, any kind, like any
Yeah,
clients.
yeah.
Okay, so if Martin Luther King were not to be speaking about this injustice, do you think your client amount would decrease because you are not supporting and this kind of thing, or you just want it to be somewhere, you don't want it,
Well, due to the boycotts, I had to integrate my business. And obviously that led to more people coming in. But also the boycotts in general just affected not only my businesses but other businesses within the community. So it negatively impacts like our own sustainability.
okay, so today's argument, we find that Dr. King is fighting up for injustice. And would you say that justice should be ever postponed to keep people comfortable?
No,
No.
but I do believe forcing compliance through economic and social pressure can set a dangerous precedent and create resentment rather than lasting glorification.
So if you feel like the compliance was forced, if your rights were being denied, would you speak out?
Yeah.
And how would you speak out?
Due to me being a business owner, I feel like I could speak to my community. Once they come in, I could speak to the customer and say like, hey, this sucks for me. It might suck for you too. And then have that kind of like sort of relationship go on. And then therefore, peacefully adhere to.
Okay, so knowing the current plan of how you can support your community, do you feel your community members come to you in that motion? Does your business hold as a staple for justice in your community the way that you feel it should?
I'm a restaurant. I don't really.
So
There
they
is
don't.
just
Sorry. Did the thought ever cross your mind that maybe King's peacefulness was not for the avoidance of chaos?
not for the avoidance. I mean, it did create chaos. Like, it did disrupt my business. And, like, it's kind of, I feel like that kind of, like, encouraged, like, laws to be broken. Like, yeah, like, allowing one group to break laws to achieve their goals encourages, like, others to do the same, like, regardless of the cause.
While we both say that laws should not be broken, we do want to see society progress. And if so, how can we progress society without civil disobedience? What happened in front of your restaurant seems as a plain example of civil disobedience, as people needing to speak up because they're not feeling heard in their communities, even in small businesses.
True. You may be seated. Are there any objections with the witness testimony? May be seated. Thank you for your testimony. Can we hear from witness number 2? Raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give in this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So you may proceed. My name is C. Van Woodward, and I am a historian known for my research on the history of segregation in the American South, and I present my findings without taking sides, relying strictly on historical evidence. Throughout history, civil disobedience has played a powerful but complex role in society. For example, the Montgomery bus boycott sparked by Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her seat was a nonviolent protest that led to desegregation of public transportation and energized the broader civil rights movement. Similarly, Gandhi's Salt March in India demonstrated how peaceful civil obedience can inspire a nation's quest for independence. The Greensboro sit-ins further illustrate how targeted nonviolent protests can create substantial legislative change by challenging segregation in public spaces. Meanwhile, the Birmingham civil rights protests, though effective in prompting policy reforms, also resulted in significant disruption and violence, highlighting the mixed consequences of civil disobedience. On the other hand, some historical examples, such as the Croton massacre in Sudan and the 1932 Bonus March in the United States, demonstrate how protests can escalate into violence and social instability, affecting innocent citizens and communities. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s approach to civil disobedience was rooted in nonviolence and moral responsibility to oppose unjust laws, laws that strip people of dignity and equal rights. However, these protests invariably disrupted economic activity, daily life, impacting businesses, families, and vulnerable groups, including senior citizens. As historian, I recognize the duality. Civil disobedience has been essential in advancing justice and equality, but has also posed challenges to social order and stability. This perspective is to help frame the critical questions before us in this trial about the balance between the pursuit of justice and maintaining social harmony. Prosecution, you may rise and question our second witness.
So you acknowledge that civil disobedience is complex and has mixed consequences, correct?
Correct.
And you acknowledge that the Montgomery bus protests led to disruption, including disrupted bus service, and many citizens, including families and senior citizens, were unable to go about their daily lives, correct?
Correct.
And you do acknowledge that King's protests are rooted in nonviolence, but you also acknowledge that there's no guarantee that this will be the actual result of the protests, and that these protests still cause disruption, correct?
Correct.
And therefore, these protests, through causing social disruption, could be argued to pose challenges to social order and create social instability, correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
You may. Defense, you may rise and question our witness.
So I would like to bring in a quote from one of our writers called Eric Fromm. he had quoted saying that human history began with an act of disobedience, asserting that progress is built not on conformity but in moral courage to refuse injustice.
In this quote, we would like to ask you, are you familiar with the classic biblical story of the Adam and Eve? Yes. Okay, so in our quote from Frost, he takes this story apart and he says that the classic act of societal change and progress is in biting the apple. People take the apple and apply it to our normal everyday life today. Today, here, Martin Luther King is trying to bite the apple for the rest of society.
I would like to ask a question. What evidence shows that peaceful protests led to legislative change?
As stated before in my original statement, Dr. King's leadership in the Montgomery bus boycott and the Birmingham Civil Rights Campaign demonstrated peaceful resistance as a powerful tool. Despite many attempts to provoke violence, King's disciplined, nonviolent approach maintained moral authority and helped secure important civil rights victories.
Did, in your expert opinion, was King a threat or a necessary reformer?
I would say that King was definitely a necessary reformer. Historically, King's philosophy of nonviolence emphasized love, dignity, and accepting legal consequences. This stood in contrast to protests that turned violent, which often lost public support. His disciplined approach gained broad sympathy and pressured lawmakers to enact reform. So I truly believe that in situations like this, we just need to promote non-violence. Of course, some things may come out of it that wasn't expected, but I think the planned protests and the planned violence to, possible communities, and we have to think about the possible victims when we're planning events like this. So like I said before, I think King's philosophy of nonviolence is what really made him stood out during this time.
Okay, so I would take your idea of King's philosophy and say that it itself has not spurred violence, rather it has simply revealed the violence already embedded within society. Because of King's peaceful resistance, people would not be already aware of what injustice actually is. Real peace is not simply silent suffering, it is justice turned into reality. The moral order of human society is restored by the actions of Dr. King challenging such immoral laws. Society is not destabilized by this, it's in fact safely.
So do you think that the protesters acted violently or were they met with violence?
I would say historically, people can argue both sides, but definitely I think that when any group is protesting and they're already met with tear gas and violent police armies already ready for them, kind of expecting them to act out, one could argue that that could be the reason why they were met with these issues. But historically, historically, as long as one is able to take their punishment voluntarily, it shows the protesters' respect for the legal system, which distinguishes their action from lawlessness. It highlights the protesters' moral stance, willing to face consequences to prompt reform of unjust laws.
There was, I would like to carry on with your statement. Dr. King comes out as saying that this is about everything that Hitler did in Germany. It was legal. What is called a law that does not conform with human dignity shall not, in its case, be considered moral, but obeyed. So from that question, do you think that, why is civil disobedience considered essential in democratic societies?
historical evidence suggests that these advances or civil obedience were very unlikely to happen without it. Courts and legislators were resistant or slow to act on their own. Public protests created the urgency and awareness and necessary to push for the change.
So in your statement here, would we can see today that King's actions are in fact not violent, but that civil push that everybody needed, that we see historically bring up our society. You may take a seat. Does anyone object to what the witness has said? Then we will hear from our final witness. You may take a seat. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give in this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
You may proceed.
My name is Fatima Kasise. Back in the 60s, when I used to live in Atlanta as a college student, if I'm remembering the date correctly, it was October 19th, 1960. And I was in the Atlanta student movement. And on that day specifically, we were involved in a sit-in we had our group leader, Lonnie C. King, who was also an activist, and he asked Dr. King to help participate in the sit-in with us. We did a sit-in at segregated lunch counters, so they weren't serving us Black people, and we sat in the sit-in until police showed up. We were all arrested, and lucky enough, I was able to be let go after my first court appearance, and I was able to get a close-up with King, and it felt so eye-opening. Our group looked up to activists like Dr. King, especially for his peaceful protest. For him to come join us when he didn't have to felt so empowering. And hearing his words with the interviewer about how he thought this would get people to pay attention to segregation and get at the end, and he was right. This allowed the issue of segregated lunch centers to be looked at, and finally getting what we fought for and desegregating lunch centers in the fall of 1961. King ended up in jail for 6 months because of our sit-in because he broke his state probation. Moments like this are always powerful to look back at because King's participation and arrest became big moves and we gained success. Focusing on nonviolence and being inspired by King's way of change helped us in the end, and I always reminisce about this specific sit-in.
Prosecution, you may rise and question our final witness.
Participated in the protests Dr. King encouraged, right? And you were aware that some of these protests could involve breaking certain city laws, correct? And you knew that the protests occurred without a permit, correct?
Yeah.
Did the crowds block streets and make traffic difficult to move, correct?
Because it was at a center, so we weren't really outside. We're inside. That's it. We're just waiting to be served.
Could you say that every person in the crowd stayed calm at the time?
Yeah, I can.
Would you agree that large crowds could sometimes or happen to be unpredictable?
Yeah, I can see that, but I feel like our main point was to be inspired by King, and obviously he followed the peaceful protesting. We all talked about it. We agreed not to be destructive, and we just, I guess, followed the protocols and sit-ins.
Did you have any way to guarantee that potential bad actors would not join your protests and cause further disruptions?
Great question. I feel like that can happen, but we didn't really think about that. We just thought like, what's with that?
So would you say you understand that civil disobedience can encourage societal tension and increase law breaking?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Would you agree that civil disobedience can encourage societal tension and increase law breaking?
I wouldn't agree, because I feel so it's necessary, because we ended up getting what we wanted, and segregated lunch luncheons are not right. So although, yeah, it is law breaking in the sense of looking at like generally, we did get what we wanted, and I think that's like the more ethical and moral like success.
Friends, you may rise and question our last one. Hello. Today we listened to your story, and first question we'd like to ask is, what prompted y'all to start protesting?
Like I said, it was because of King. Like obviously we were majority Black students, and we were being segregated from our white peers. So we just wanted to be equal and follow what King preached. We agreed with him. We know that we wanted to have the same treatment that our white counterparts were getting. So that was our inspiration.
So was it King, or was it the reflection of yourself in his word?
I feel like it was 100%. So obviously it reflects on us first, and then like we obviously got some inspiration from King, but it was what we wanted. But so like it was what each of us individually wanted. We wanted like peace.
So from what I heard in your story, you guys were sat at the counter, and sit-in was pretty successful, but you guys did also ask for King's support. So initially, King did not initiate the sit-in.
No.
No, he just solely inspired it.
No, he was involved in it, and like I'm trying to say like our movements or like other protests we have done were like inspired by him and his way of protesting. Like,
Okay. Understood. So with that being said, we would like to bring in King's letter from Birmingham. He states that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He warns that the greatest threat to society is not opposition to unjust law, but acceptance of it. And illustrates how in the 1960s, legal systems defended racism, segregation, and discrimination rather than the rights of citizens. There at that countertop, y'all saw segregation, the laws being put against you firsthand, correct?
Yeah, that's
Okay, so would you say that your movement, while it did reflect King, would you say that solely it was for the injustice everywhere that he was describing?
how it is.
I would like to say that he opened the door to dialogue, transformations, and dignity rather than division. His vision insists that bravery and compassion must unite in pursuit of a society where all people are treated as equals. So would you say that you felt safer protesting peacefully than rather than staying silent?
Definitely, I definitely felt safe. I felt okay. I was with a group of people that I trusted, that I knew, and being with King even made me feel even more better.
While you were, as you say, peacefully protesting, were you met with any kind of startup violence, like from the other side that did not support King's theory or your civil disobedience?
Not that I'm aware of. It was a pretty. It was like I was saying, it was just a sit-in until police showed up. That's like the only thing we encountered was getting arrested.
Okay, and considering that today's laws do file, file people into such a strict segregation, do you believe that you were breaking the law sitting in?
I I feel like this could be like based on opinion, but if you look at it like generally and looking at the specific law at that time, we did break the law. But like I said, I do think it was necessary and I don't regret it.
Okay, so 100% breaking our laws were necessary for societal movement.
Yeah, but we ended up getting what we wanted.
In your opinion, what did America gain from King's actions?
I feel like obviously we moved a big step after his activism, after everything he has done. I do think there is more equality now, obviously. And I think that as Black people, we've gotten more opportunities because of him. From that specific sit-in, not to keep repeating myself, but we did gain a success. And obviously he put us a step forward, especially in Atlanta.
You may take a seat. You may go back to your seat as well. Thank you. Now that both prosecution and defense have heard the other side of the case, prosecution, what do you have to say to defend your stand?
As the other side states, unless unjust laws.
You may rise.
As the defense side states, unjust laws must be challenged. King argues one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. We argue that unjust laws should be changed, but there are legal challenges for that. King chose a method that disrupted daily life, harmed businesses, and caused conflict. Breaking laws, even unjust ones, encourages others to break any law they dislike. And then from our outside evidence, we also see the Heritage Foundation warns that repeating civil disobedience is justifiable but dangerous and must be used only in rare and exceptional circumstances. And they also say that the multiplication of civil disobedience attempts can have a corrosive effect on the public's attachment to law and enforcement.
Members of the jury, the defense ignores the fact that these protests disrupted daily life and created real tension in the city. Even Dr. King admits he caused nonviolent tension, and the Heritage Foundation warns repeated civil disobedience weakens respect for the law. Good intentions do not excuse actions that harm the community. We must follow the advice of local religious leaders across multiple faiths in understanding that honest convictions in racial matters could properly be pursued in the courts rather than inciting disruption and creating prime conditions for violence on the streets. The defense argues that civil disobedience is nonviolent, but nonviolent does not mean non-disruptive. Streets were blocked, stores lost income, people felt unsafe, and King himself admits that he stands between two opposing forces, the group that has adjusted to segregation and another filled with bitterness and hatred that comes perilously close to advocating justice. And this proves his actions stirs tension in a large community that's already in conflict.
And despite Dr. King's nonviolent intentions, the reality of the situation is that these protests stirred further tension in a community already split between complacency and hatred. And Dr. King has no way of anticipating how masses of displaced citizens will act when gathered for the purpose of civil disruption. It's far too easy for bad actors and those with violent intention to take advantage of these mass protests to incite disruption and violence, and Dr. King's call for disobedience to the law can only encourage this.
The defense also argues that civil disobedience creates positive change. However, positive outcomes do not erase harmful methods, and King even admits that his actions create disruption and his movement creates tension that forces negotiation. The Heritage Foundation warns that these methods can inspire others, writing that limitation of civil disobedience must heighten the likelihood that people lose respect for the law.
We must follow the lead of these religious leaders in their public call for peace and quote, unite for a peaceful Birmingham, as seen in the letter from Birmingham. When rights are constantly denied, a clause should be pressed in the courts and negotiations among local leaders, but not in the streets.
You may have a seat. Defense, you may rise. Do you have anything to say in response of the prosecution? Yes. The prosecution is convinced that King's method is dangerous because it may even lead a man to violate the law. They argue that the law is order and that any person taking choice on which law to obey will bring chaos. They say that King's marches ignited tension, conflict, and fanned the flames of unrest. Change must come by voting, negotiation, patience, not protest. An American journalist, Kate Klonick, writes about uncalibrated punishment, where she describes people are reacting rather than reflecting. In today's society, we are seeing a lot of reaction. We are seeing reaction, violence on the street. But that is not because they are reflecting of what is going on. We are not reflecting the laws that are not abiding by every human being. King confidently said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That is what we're reflecting on today.
All of this falls like a house of cards before the history of mankind. Has never equated to morality. Slavery was lawful. Jim Crow segregation was lawful, and so were poll tax and literacy tests. Civil disobedience has itself not spurred violence, rather it has simply revealed the violence already embedded within society. Because of King's peaceful resistance, people would not be aware of what injustice actually is. Real peace is not simply silent suffering. It is justice turned into reality. The moral order of human society is restored by the actions of Dr. King. In challenging such immoral laws, society is not destabilized, but it is saved by him. When someone fails to resist an unjust law, the law becomes eternal. Dr. King's very presence forced America to comfort its moral inconsistence between the Constitution and the law of the land. The dehumanizing reality of Jim Crow and its grave implication of injustice. Change, integration, voting rights came all from disobedience, was launched against unjust laws.
Your verdict, members of the jury, will echo through annuals of mankind. You're not only passing judgment on Dr. King, but also passing judgment on whether justice is worth the fight. You may have a seat. Prosecution, do you have anything to say in response to the defense? Okay. We will now hear closing arguments. Prosecution, you may rise.
Members of the jury, Dr. King encouraged regular citizens to break the law and even admitted in his letter from Birmingham jail that his actions created nonviolent tension in the city already divided and close to conflict. However, King's nonviolent intentions will not matter when his mass call for civil disobedience inevitably results in damage, destruction, or worse. We have proven that protests blocked streets, hurt businesses, delayed workers, and created fear and frustration in the community. If these protests are left unchecked, it is only a matter of time before they escalate further. The Heritage Foundation warns that civil disobedience should be a rare occurrence because repeated use creates a corrosive effect on the public attachment to law. When one group breaks laws without consequence, no matter the cause, others will take it as an invitation to do the same. For these reasons, we ask you to find Dr. King's approach guilty of harming social stability.
You be seated. Defense, you may rise. Let's hear your closing argument.
The jury, ladies and gentlemen, this case is not merely about a man. It is a question about the soul of the nation. Dr. King sought not to destroy law, but to redeem it. He did not do law breaking to cause chaos. He broke it to reveal injustice. His marches were peaceful. Pure were his presences. Inclusive was his visions. He never lifted a weapon. He lifted people.
Dr. King challenged unjust laws, not for their own sake, but because of the stakes democracy requires citizens with courage to demand better. Without his civil disobedience, millions would still be denied their basic right. Rather to condemn Dr. King is to condemn progress itself. Progress which makes our nation stronger, fairer, and more humane.
If civil resistance receives punishment as crime, freedom itself becomes a little fragile. Punishing moral courage creates a indocile arena for the existence of injustice to perpetuate itself. It was not Dr. King that fried America. He helped it to live up to what it is now. Choose justice, choose conscience, choose equality. Find Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. not guilty.
May take a seat.
Members of the jury, you have heard all of the evidence and arguments in this case. It is your duty to decide the facts based only on the evidence presented and the law as I have explained it. Please consider the testimony exhibits and all the instructions carefully before reaching your verdict. You may step to the side and converse with each other. Come back when you are ready to read the verdict. Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes.
You may rise. Please read the verdict out loud.
After reviewing the arguments and evidence, we find Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. not guilty as his actions of civil obedience were a moral response to unjust laws and were aimed at creating positive change in our harming society.
You may be seated. The verdict of the jury is accepted. This case is now concluded. Court is adjourned.
So does everyone see? Anna. So this is the amazing class, amazing of interdisciplinary studies. And you know what? Next week is no homework, no homework.